Thank you. Well, I'm happy to say that Coaching Week has gone really well. This is our last day for Coaching Week, and we do have a regular meeting coming up June 10th at 11:30 Mountain Standard Time, and it will be Ethical Use of Technology as a Coach by Kathy Liska. So we invite you to attend our regular meetings also, and Patricia will be putting a link to our website. We do have some board members here. We have Patricia, and she is going to be doing our recording and in the background, and she is our special events coordinator, Patricia Till Vincent. We also have Amber Usen Davy, and she is our vice president, who is going to be our president next year. Welcome, Amber, and welcome to Todd Hess, who is our current president, and he will be our past president for the next board. I'm happy to introduce Chris Coachella. He is an experienced scientist, entrepreneur, and innovator of products and services spanning consumer goods, education, research methods, and healthcare information technology. Chris has founded and sold 2 businesses, one in healthcare imaging and the other an award-winning STEM educational toy called Brackets. Am I pronouncing that right, Chris?
Brackets.
Brackets, okay, thank you. Chris splits his time between deepening partner relationships for tech companies and his greatest passion, helping business leaders and teams to make high-performing decisions. While on this journey, he has coached, presented, and taught in professional settings like the Lean Startup Conference, IDEO Innovation Competitions, and the University of Utah. Chris is an experienced ICF coach, certified ICF coach, and earned his bachelor's degree in economics from UC Berkeley and a master's degree in physical geography from CU Boulder, which led him to research trips from the Grand Canyon to Antarctica. And Chris is one of our members of ICF High Country. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you so much, Stacy. And thank you all for being here today. Just a quick background on my practice. I'm hired by business owners, small business owners usually, to help them generate high quality information, evidence, and practices that lead to high performing decisions. So before we get into this, let's all take one moment to do 2 deep belly breaths. One all the way in, all the way out, 2 times. All right, thank you. So a few housekeeping things as we get going into this hour together. If you can turn on your cameras, that's great. And let's also use the chat feature to ask questions or socialize with each other while we're having this conversation. And I'm okay with things if they get messy a little bit. In fact, I'd like to think of this space today as kind of a mad scientist lab where we can all interact together to learn and experiment. So I'm good if people just want to speak up and interrupt if something's not clear or if there's other questions. So please feel free to do that. I'm going to also drop my information into the chat if anyone wants to connect later or connect on LinkedIn. So why are we here? First of all, I would really like us to have some fun. And that is the get messy part. So please participate as you're comfortable. And second, we're here to understand how to make high performing decisions and what is a high performing decision, such that we can create a different future for ourselves or potentially for our clients in business and life. Ultimately, that future is up to you. I'm going to share my screen here. So many screens. Here we go. think everyone should be seeing that. So I want to start off on why this topic of high-performing decisions is important to me. I've started 4 businesses and sold 2. One of these was an educational toy called Brackets that you see in the slide. I invented this in 2011 and successfully went to market at the American Specialty Toy Retailers Association in 2012, where I loaded up the kids and a trunk full of product and order forms and went to the show with my elementary school kids. In 2014, I sold the business and remained as a partner. We then set out to enter the large consumer toy market. The products were sold at Target, Amazon, Walmart online. Sales were good at Target, our main revenue source, but not quite good enough to stay in Target. We didn't have enough SKUs to kind of own a piece of the shelf. Leaving Target, though, left a huge revenue hole in the business that we needed to fill. We ended up filling that hole with educational sales through distributors, school districts, and a large contract with a nationwide preschool called Primrose, who ended up writing a curriculum, their own curriculum around the product. However, the following year, the majority owner decided to make another run at the consumer market and leave behind the successful yet more modest educational market. Once again, the consumer market did not meet expectations, and those decisions cost the business and the people 4 years and the investor several $million. These decisions were based largely on the lure of a shiny outcome. So it's this experience and other experiences in starting businesses that I realized, despite money, experience, and education, poor decisions are rather common. And this realization has brought me to a place where I can thrive as a person, as a professional, as well as help my customers achieve the future they desire. So this slide here, so a question: what is the problem that we were trying to solve today? This phrase, "here be dragons," was originally used by explorers to describe the unknown world beyond. No matter how you look at life or business, generating a new future is uncertain and may be full of these unknown dragons. Today, we'll learn how to tame those dragons so that we and our clients can go forward into that future with a high likelihood of success. So now it's time to participate a little bit and tell some stories. So I'd like all of you to think of a good decision that you've made where something meaningful was at stake. Maybe that was a career move or a business decision, not where to go to dinner or lunch. And then as you're thinking about that decision, answer the question, why was this a good decision? And then I'd love it if a few of us could share this story, share the story of a good decision and why it was a good decision. Anyone game?
Hey, Chris, John Cormanick here. I'm game.
Okay, I'm going to stop the share so we can do kind of a better job at talking to each other. Okay, John, go for it.
So almost 24 years ago, June 3rd, it'll be 24 years, my wife and I decided to relocate from San Diego to Boise, Idaho. Our daughter was 4 at the time. We didn't know a soul. I did have a job offer, and that's why we moved here. But the decision to pick up roots and move to a new place was life-changing.
And why was that a good decision? What about life changing?
It allowed us to spend time with our daughter and not be on the hamster wheel all the time. It allowed us to have a lifestyle out in nature that we wouldn't have had in San Diego, and it allowed us to get to the place where we are today, which is a wonderful place to be.
Excellent. Good story. Anyone else with a decision story? Good decision story.
Sure, I'll go.
Yeah,
This is Tracey. I had a really nice, well-paying job with a nonprofit. I was moving into my 25th year or so, no, 35th year. I was bored and tapped out and not really being used for where I thought my skill sets were. So I decided to retire and made a plan for that. Knew I couldn't just sit in my garden. So I decided to become a coach. And that was 4 years ago. I successfully retired last year. I've been coaching for 3 years. And at this point, I see that as a very good decision. And I'm actually working with the company that I worked with for a very long time and loved, but wasn't in a well-suited position.
And so your coaching practice now is successful.
Well, it's moving in that direction. It's pretty early. I'm a newbie, really, but very excited about how I can use my lifetime of experience to help other organizations become better.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate that. I think Ian has raised his hand.
Hi guys, coming in all the way from Costa Rica, so apologies if the network dies on me. Decision in about 2000, 2001, option to ride a motorcycle around the world. So August 2002, I set off with several mates and we motorcycled around the world for 3.5 months, about 35,000 miles. And 2003 went back to Australia to visit with my wife. 2004 we migrated to Australia, and then 3 years ago we migrated to Costa Rica. And welcome to Costa Rica in COVID. So not quite the end outcome that we were looking for, but definitely the decision to motorcycle around the world was phenomenal. Seeing so many people, places, and things that you just, you know, what's in the book, you know, opening the curtains and actually seeing the Taj Mahal, for example, experiences you just can't repeat. But phenomenal decision, brilliant. I'll do it again in a heartbeat.
So good outcome in all the experiences and people met and places seen and discovery. Great.
Definitely a journey of discovery.
Anyone else would like to share a story?
I'll share. This is Blaine here in Boise.
Thanks, Blaine.
When I was in college, I had some of my peers that had an aspiration of becoming a professor. And I always thought at that time, there's no way I'll ever be a professor. That's just not me. I'm not that caliber of a person in terms of knowledge and experience and so forth. So I just thought that was completely outside of my league. And I came to Boise, worked at Micron for 26 years as an engineer, held different leadership positions. And towards the little bit latter end of that time there, I was invited to teach as an adjunct professor at Boise State in the computer science department. And that was really a step outside of my comfort zone. I thought, wow, I don't know if I can do that. And I don't know if I can be really good at it. But I decided to take the plunge and step out of my comfort zone and do that while working full time. And that experience was in part life-changing for me because it changed my perspective about myself. And I realized that I have a gift for teaching. I mean, I always liked teaching, but that solidified it for me that I have a gift for teaching. I had a lot of good feedback from the students. I loved it. It took a lot of hours. It was very tiring. There wasn't a lot of, which was surprising to me at the time, but there was not a lot of oversight. So I had to come up with the textbook. I had to create the entire curriculum, write all the tests, all the quizzes, do all the lectures, everything without much, again, supervision by the department.
Yeah.
And so it was a very interesting experience for me. And I came away from that much more confident in my ability. And while I don't know if I still want to be a professor working in that environment, I feel much more confident that yes, I can teach. I love to teach. And so it was somewhat life-changing for me.
Thanks for sharing, Blaine. So the decision to accept that invitation led to some of these discoveries, observations, and outcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess one of the lessons for me was confidence is a result. And it's a result of doing hard things, and many times things that are outside of our comfort zone. That's when confidence comes.
Yeah. Excellent. Good observation. So speaking of observations, let's move on from the stories. And I'd like to hear from everyone what they're hearing in these stories. Are there any patterns or observations that you can make about the stories? Let's see. Purva, your hand is up.
Hi. So as when they took the decision, they did not know what will come out of it. They were not sure. They just took the decision, and in the end, probably they listened to their gut feel, or their close ones' gut feel, and just the discussion, and it helped them, have a positive outcome.
Great. They didn't know what was coming. They acted on a gut feel. Someone in the chat said open to possibilities and new territory, out of the comfort zone.
Yes.
Great. Anyone else with an observation to share by chat or audio?
May I say, maybe something problem with my English, but I will say you have to make a move, some step, and only then you will understand what will come in the future. Without even small movement, it's nothing. Just thoughts and no decisions, no observations, nothing.
Right, it's the decision, the action, or in your words, the movement that then reveals some of this, yeah? Okay. Is there anything missing that you think from these stories, when you take a step back and think about decision making? Is there anything missing?
I'll just say that in the brief summary of my story, I didn't really talk about the analysis that went into my decision. So I think that's an important aspect of decision making, is really looking at what's worst case scenario, what are the positives, weighing that out, some sort of analysis.
Mm-hmm. The how, the process leading up to it. Anyone else?
I think the why is important.
Go ahead. Do that over.
I think the why is important. At least it was for me.
Okay.
The bigger the risk, or maybe the bigger the opportunity, the more important the why. Because I think that the why is what kind of keeps us going when we're going to hit the roadblocks along the way.
Mm-hmm. The purpose. Yeah, for sure. Excellent. These are great observations. Anyone else that's begging to say something?
I was just going to say that, might have that big idea or big step, but to Svetlana's comment, how do you break that down? When you get stuck in maybe analysis paralysis, how do you find the small steps?
Yes, indeed, that is important.
And how do you deal with setbacks or failure?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's a motivation to keep going.
Yeah, sometimes we know what drives that motivation. Maybe sometimes we don't. Yeah. So great, what wonderful conversation. Thank you all for participating, and let's keep this going as we cover a little more ground. So two statistics from studies that have been done. Forbes research has found, in a study, showed that 500 managers found that with an increase in decision-making process, found a 20% lift in performance. So Tracey, you kind of spoke strongly toward process analysis. A McKinsey study showed that over 50% of 1,200 managers expressed frustration over broken decision-making processes in their organization. There's really two factors that impact our future outcomes: luck and how good we are at making our decisions, the quality of our decisions. We can't control luck. We can't control the quality of our decisions. An increased decision-making performance produces, on average, better and better outcomes while risking less time, money, and other resources. So let's explore this pattern of decision-making a little bit, which we just did in a conversation. Let's see if we can kind of ground this. I'm going to jump back to my screen share. And I'd love it if everyone stuck with the chat. I think my chat disappears when I screen share. So maybe Patricia or Stacy chime in if there's some good comments coming through. At least I don't have the ability to see it all. So most of those stories I think we observed talked about the outcome or the results. And that's definitely a key part of making a decision, right? We make it to accomplish something. And we get there, or we don't get there, or we get there, somewhere in between. So there's the results. And of course, there's the decision itself before we get to the results. And if we're breaking this down into pieces, and some of this was said in the conversation, what other kind of pieces are there to the full decision-making process and its outcomes, the whole cycle? Anyone want to jump in? I think, oh, someone's going to talk.
Can you repeat the question?
The question is, what are the pieces in the decision-making cycle? We have two up here now. There's the decision and then the outcomes. So one question we might ask is, what do we do with our results?
Analyze them to see, evaluate if the decision made was right or not.
Okay, so we can now assess our decision based on the outcomes that we get. Oh, that's luck. So that's learning, right? We can learn from these results.
And Chris, Tracey said generating options.
Generating options. I love that. Generating options.
Svetlana mentioned the why. What's important.
Right? Why?
Good to understand the risks involved.
Risks, excellent.
SWOT,
Uncertainty.
SWOT analysis, one possible process.
SWOT analysis, yeah.
Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats.
So all of these things fall into the process before we make a decision. What's interesting is the stories talked almost exclusively about the outcomes. And if you observe throughout your day, coaching people or interacting with people, it's often the good results that people highlight. And that's great because that's the trophy. It's a measure of success. But it's really only part of the story. It doesn't talk about what was learned, even if the success was there. It's often good stories you hear and not bad stories. Yet we can have a great process, we can make a great decision, and often have a bad outcome. And likewise, we could have a poor process and a poor decision and have a good outcome. So what's important here is to broaden our field of view on what a good decision is, how to continually improve them through learning, and what is our process, and how could we do better at that? So I've spent much of my time kind of decomposing this through my experience with startups and launching new businesses and doing product market fit. And I've broken this down into 5 sort of stages of process, post-process, and learning. And these are starting with number 1. I think someone just mentioned it. What does the current environment look like? Maybe that's a SWOT analysis. Maybe it fits in here. Maybe it's, what do we care about, right? What is our purpose? Why are we doing these things? This could be individual. This could be a team inside a company. How does that align with the rest of the organization? And I think one of the most important aspects to this is, what are the conversations that people are having? And by conversations, I'm thinking maybe the leaders of the organization, maybe all the way down to the conversations we might be having with ourselves. And one of the reasons I like conversations is that conversations lead to commitment, and they lead to action. And someone mentioned that a bit earlier. It's the decision and the action that bring us to new information. But we can have those conversations, all throughout. And the second phase, which someone also mentioned, I believe, in our discussion, is, what are the options? And the way I've learned to break this down and implement this in the process is, what are our preferences? What would we like to see happen, or what does the team like to see happen? And that's a bit of the why. What are the payoffs? What do we gain? Could be more time with our family in a move. It could be, leaving something that we don't prefer any longer, a bad position or a job. And then I think, Blaine, you mentioned risks and uncertainty. And so here is the probabilities. So if we have these options, how can we lay them out in terms of our preference, the payoff, and the likelihood that that might come true if we were to make a decision. So I want to pause there for a minute and see if anyone has any thoughts about those two steps. Anything you think might be missing, or?
I would add one.
Yeah.
One word, I guess, maybe to the consider part, and that is values.
Values, yes.
Yeah, I think that's one thing I like to do with people, is that help them get really clear and say what their top 5 values are in their career or health or whatever they're talking about. Because sometimes we make decisions that are counter to our values because we're not clear. And so we let something that's less valuable take precedence over something that's more valuable. And then we make a decision that takes us in the wrong direction, that's not really in alignment with what our values are, because we're not clear on those. So I think maybe just a good review and kind of touch base on, okay, is this in alignment with my top 5 values?
Excellent. Anyone else?
Chris, would you put values under preferences? Would that fit in there?
They're similar, they're similar. And I think it's important to include. Now, this diagram is super simple for the point of the conversation today. And one of the things that is unique about my process and the layers beneath this is that I've worked hard, and the people that I've used this with, and even some other coaches that have used this, is that this is a simple map, but it's not all the territory that we encounter. And so a values exercise, could very well be, right, a better way to frame or even think about preferences. And so it's open, right? We can steer this any way we want.
Ian also mentioned the "what's in it for me" question, which sounds like payoff also.
Yeah. What's in it for me? That could also be what's in it for the team. It could be both of those things, right? I mean, an engineer on a technology team has what's in it for me, and their worldview and their culture and their values. But the team itself also may have a set of those. That also speaks to the prior step of what are the conversations and the concerns that everyone has. And a component of both of these, and this is where a lot of information is being generated from people through the conversation or an assessment of the environment. And I know it's a popular topic now, and I think there's even been presentations in the ICF High Country Forum on psychological safety. How does that play in to these two steps?
I would see that as, number one, you've got to, that comes into the very first conversation, so that you can have a conversation, and open and productive conversation,
Yeah, I don't know who said that because I can't see everybody.
Oh, this is Tracey.
Tracey, got it. Yes, I'm so glad you said that. And I view it as it is one of those first fundamental, creating the space, laying the groundwork. If this is information generation and it's not a psychologically safe environment, then people won't take risks. And this is sort of the definition of it. Will people raise their hand and say what they really care about, what they're really concerned about, and have a conversation with with all stakeholders or participants in this process. If only I could put all the words on here, it would be really messy though. So again, this is kind of a map, but not the specific territory.
I like the idea of a map, Chris, because it's really flexible. Like you said, there's a lot of space. So someone could take this and go toward value. Somebody else can take it and go in a different direction. And if you put all the words in, people would have less freedom to do that.
Right. And I do have a white paper on this topic. So if you're interested in it, it sort of goes deeper into each phase and what might be relevant or other ideas. And if you want to shoot me an email or connect over LinkedIn, I will happily, share that. But like a lot of maps, if you put everything on a map, right, all the transportation and all the trails and all the biology, you can't really see anything. And so, it's always a bit of an abstract. Anyone with any other thoughts about these two? Okay. So the third phase is where we take this sort of information generated, collected, and determine, what do we know as fact, assertions, what's already been grounded with evidence, and then how can we also take that information that we have and generate a further layer of information called assessments. So this team or this person involved in this process has produced and collected this information, and what does it mean? In itself, it might mean something, but for the purpose of these cares and concerns and what's in it for me's, it may mean something different. And so in a way, it's sort of an interpretation for the shared objectives. Of these options. What are people's thoughts about how assessments show up? What would be an assessment?
It feels like the experiment cycle. So it feels like this is the point, like you said, the actions to act on it, see what happens. Get more data back to you.
Yes. Before that act, let's say, before the experiment and the kind of commitment of resources, what might be another layer of assessment on a current inventory of information?
So question, Chris.
Yeah.
For this model, I'm trying to make sure I'm clear on what you're proposing here. Is that it sounds like the first two that we talked about are about gathering information.
Mm-hmm.
And now the assess sounds like twofold. You're talking about taking all the information and now kind of sitting back and kind of looking at it all and saying, okay, let's see where everything fits. How does it fit? And bringing all these things into place. Values can come into here too, I guess. And then, but also it sounds like you're also saying maybe there's additional assessments, formal assessments that can be also added to this part. Are you talking about both of those, or am I missing something there?
No, I think I am talking about both of those in the sense that you have this sort of you've collected what you have and know, and perhaps ranked it, And now you're about to go forward in some way. And what could happen in this stage that would make that decision for an action, or I labeled an experiment, less risky?
That's what Tracey just mentioned. She's saying the assessment could be a variety of things depending on the amount of risk.
Okay. Maybe it is the amount of risk. Maybe that is an additional piece here.
And Ian says it depends on the decision being made as to whether assessment and experiment can be done. Sometimes this decision is simply subjective.
Yeah, there's always a point at which you don't know everything. The goal here being, how can we collect more? How can we know a little bit more than just our inventory of information to reduce the risk? And I have a metaphor for this. And so in Utah, we have all these, mesas, right? And you can get up on them, and they're basically, circular, and they have a cliff everywhere. And so imagine, you walk up to the cliff and it's 50 feet high, and that's your level of kind of risk and uncertainty. You can jump, and 50 feet is, it's pretty likely that I might break a leg and or something worse. So the question in this third phase is, I see myself at the edge of a cliff based on all this information. What can we do here? What else can we do with what we know before we jump?
Tracey suggests a prototype. Sorry about that.
A prototype? Okay.
We are in experiment stage or still in assess?
Still in assess. And so I would put prototype in an experiment.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it could be, as an example, it could be you have this information, and how does another conversation perhaps, or maybe other people in the organization could add a layer of interpretation, another assessment on it, or how might we ground the information? Or if we see a matrix of preferences, payoffs, and probabilities, and we see three options really coming closer into focus, but we still have a certain amount of uncertainty, how can we further reduce that uncertainty? Like, who might we talk to? What additional information might make one of those options look better?
I mean, you could
That's
consult.
what I was going
people
to
who-
add. Sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead, Amber.
I was just going to say, consult with maybe people who've been in similar places or dealing with similar issues.
Good example.
That like you see one way down from that rocky cliff, how have others done it, or what other maybe pathways or footholds maybe you don't see.
Right. So to continue with the metaphor, and thank you for coming back to that, is, you might walk along all the cliff edges, looking for that path. And it's very situational. So we don't have a working example here. So it's kind of hard. But it's taking what you have and people coming together that are involved to add another layer of interpretation or assessment on what exists, to bring a single decision into focus, and to also identify the smallest decision possible. And I think that's a really, go ahead.
Can you explain that? Smallest decision possible?
Yeah, the smallest decision possible. So we're about to make a decision. How can we make our decision smaller? In other words, with lower risk. So we know we're going to have to jump because the future is uncertain. How do we make the height of the cliff a little bit lower before we jump? So to extend Patricia's kind of example of a prototype, someone might suggest, let's go make the product. Another person might suggest, hey, whoa, product costs, $500,000. Why don't we do a prototype? Now, we haven't done either yet, right? But we just lowered the height of the cliff by a measurable amount, maybe a factor of 10. And I don't know who said it, maybe it was Amber. Who else could we go talk to that's been here before? Who could we interview? Not yet at the decision stage, right?
I was going to add, a lot of times we take counsel from our fears. And so that's something to be wary of. There's a lot of bias we have. And so I like what you're saying, that we need to talk to other people, could be a trusted friend, a spouse, other coworkers. Sometimes though, leaders surround themselves with people that just say things with what they want to hear.
Right.
And so leaders need to surround themselves with people who are going to tell them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. But I am curious to know what your thoughts are of how this model speaks to time. In other words, it's easy to, sometimes leaders are too impulsive and they move too fast. And then there are other times where people are in, like somebody else has said, we get an analysis paralysis and it takes too long. And there are too many leaders that I've heard from their direct reports that they're frustrated because their leader doesn't make decisions. They don't take action, or they take too long to resolve things because maybe they're doing a thorough, job at trying to assess and everything like that. So what does this model, or what are your thoughts to speak in terms of time to guarantee you're not at either of those extremes? Yeah,
well, and this is super situational, right? There may be other forcing factors. We have to go to market with A, B, or C kind of things. And, the amount at risk may have a time component, right? If we don't get to market or something like that. So it's upstream, right? Is it a factor, number one? And then the other sort of measure I like to put on this assessment phase is our marginal gain of new information that reduces our uncertainty, reduces the height of the cliff, is that decreasing? So if every time we ask kind of a new question to go have an interview with someone or collect an additional piece of information to ground what we already have, if we're making big leaps, big discoveries every single time, then keep doing that until you sort of are exhausted at that marginal gain. And then you're sort of at the 6-foot cliff. It's not getting any lower. You can keep walking around the mesa, but it's not getting any lower. So now it's time to make the leap. That's a way of measuring it. Of course, you could spend, a lot of time just saying, well, I'm going to find that 5-foot, right? That 5-foot cliff. But the likelihood of breaking your ankle at 5 feet and 6 feet is, probably the same. And so, that's just all part of this assessment, trying to get it to the point where it's the lowest possible height of the cliff, the lowest risk, before you really have to act and go. And at some point, and someone mentioned it earlier, you just need to act at some level. You're trying not to act too soon, and you're trying not to just sit there and never act. And so that's a regular balance. Yeah, Amber.
I think to your point with the time is also, at what point do you start to lose your own identity in the mix too, and your own brand with it too? So.
Yeah. And Blaine, I wanted to highlight something you said a minute ago about, I'm forgetting your words, but there's it's common in business to do a process called a post-mortem. And so that's after you have your results, you kind of look at the results and look at your process and say, hey, what did we do to get here? And what might we do differently next time? And that's a great learning moment if the team can do that, or if a person can do that. We can also do pre-mortems. So in advance of a decision, how could we transport ourselves into the future and imagine a future after our decision? And what might that look like? What would be the worst outcome, the worst headline on a newspaper of this decision? What would be the best headline? And then that is another way to kind of assess the comfort level of where people are in the decision-making process before the decision has to be made. And it often comes through that, oh, wow, it could be this, or gee, the bad outcome isn't so bad after all. Let's move forward. So again, it's another pre-decision component. So I know we're running up on time here a little bit. Patricia, you have your hand up, I see. Although I can't see everybody.
Actually, I was just going to say, speaking of time.
Yes.
We did.
Thank you. I'm watching it too. Then there's a decision, right? And that's really what I've labeled the experiment phase. And this is also a psychological safety move. If we frame things as learning or experiments, people are much more likely to take risks and be open to the lessons learned as opposed to getting fixed on a certain result. And then we go execute the experiment, again, as small as we possibly can to essentially reduce the amount at stake. These could be making a prototype. These could be making a one-page landing page on the web and directing traffic there. It could be using some of the systems that do A/B testing. Could be lots of things. It could be go live in a location for a month and see how you like it. Take a leave of work and go see what it's like to ride a motorcycle for a month, and then before you make a leap to do it for a year. Again, situational, but how do we poke the situation, poke the world to get a little bit more out? And then the evidence part. What did we find? Are we listening for the lessons? Are we listening for the evidence? What are our lessons? How could a postmortem help us here? And not just, hey, we got the result we wanted, or we got 50% of the result we wanted. Rather, what about our process worked? And what about our process didn't work like we thought it would? Could still be a great outcome, but maybe something about our process could be improved on, despite it being the good outcome. And then how do we loop that back? And that we know is how we can incrementally grow the quality of our decisions. So I'm going to stop the share. And are there any parting questions, thoughts, ideas? One of the things I love about, oh, go ahead.
Some good information, Chris. Really appreciate this this view on that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad. That is my hope, and that we had fun too. And I want to remind you. Oh, go ahead.
I would just say it's always great to have a model. It's so much easier to remember and to have the diagram. So thanks for putting it into a really easily understandable diagram to use. Appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's been through many iterations and is designed so that it is open to blend other elements of expertise, like the values that Blaine mentioned, or psychological safety. Certainly some of these things could just be swapped out too. But I do believe that the 5 elements are distinct, kind of social pieces. And then if you blend them all together, you sort of don't know where you are and why you're doing it, when you should be doing it. But it isn't meant to be kind of a blend that way. And so just kind of recap to sum things up on our awareness about decision making. The decision process along with the results, not just the results, is what really determines whether or not it was a good decision. It's not just the outcome. We need to look at how we got there and be mindful of that as well, even if the outcome is good. That learning from our outcomes incrementally, like kind of compound interest, makes our decision-making process better and better. And it's really the process where we spend most of our time. And if we shortchange that, we may be jumping off a bigger cliff than we need to. Well, thank you all for your time and attention and mostly participation. I really appreciate that. This is nothing without people challenging it, talking about it, and digging in and peeling away the layers. So again, I offer to you my, hope that's showing up. Oh wait, maybe I'm gonna send it to everybody. My contact information in the chat. If you'd like to connect, further the conversation, whatever that might be, or I'm happy to share my white paper, which sort of goes a bit deeper into kind of, how to blend things together and kind of, use the map.
Well, thank you again, Chris. That was, like one person remarked, chock full of information. So we really appreciate you taking the time. We have a few announcements coming up on May 26th. We have an in-person gathering in both Boise and Salt Lake. In Salt Lake, it's going to be at the Public Library, the Sprague branch. In Boise, it will be in Eagle, actually, not Boise, but at Bardenay. And then June 2nd, we do have one in-person gathering at Lucky 13. And our next regular ICF High Country meeting will be June 10th. It'll be 11:30 Mountain Standard Time, which will be the ethical use of technology as a coach by Kathy Liska. So we hope all of you can join us and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Thank you all.